push the, oh, there we go. Welcome back, live from Annapolis, really, in the committee room. It is the Environment and Transportation Committee, live and in person. I am, as always, your friendly chairman, Kumar Barve. I'm joined by the equally friendly, actually more friendly, Vice Chairman Dana Stein. We have all of our staff here. They are all awesome, but today, for a special awesomeness, is Kristen Flynn, who has done a tremendous, has and is doing a tremendous job. And so we're going to begin with, obviously, let me just set the context a little bit for what the Climate Solutions Act bills are purporting to be. And that is, we, at least a majority of us, are very concerned about the effects of climate impacts on our ecology, our coastline, our state, and our economy. And the purpose here is to kind of bear in mind one little fact that I think has kind of crystallized the reason for this kind of an action in my mind. And I'm going to mention this on the floor of the House as well. Many of you may think back to, of course, I'm not going to say that all the climate policies are wrong or that global climate change is not the most important thing. But one thing I think we ought to keep in mind is this. In 1996, the city of Atlanta hosted the Olympics, and because the venues were so far apart, they decided to shut down the street grid to automobile traffic, and if you wanted to go someplace, you had to use transit of some form, or you had to bike or walk there. During the time of the Summer Olympics, the emergency room visits for respiratory illnesses like asthma and the like crashed by 40%. And the minute the Olympics were over and the streets were open to car traffic, all of those health problems went zooming upward. And so I know there's some people who have their questions about global climate change. I'm not one of those people. I know there's some people who are questioning whether we need to get moving now. I will say that this isn't just about global climate change. In my opinion, this is also about public health and safety. And so with that, we're going to begin with, we have been talking very extensively for nearly 7 months with our counterpart in the Senate, Senator Paul Pinsky and his staff, and we have worked out a lot of, we of course passed 2 bills in the House, one of mine which went to the Economic Matters Committee and another that was here in our committee, and we've since been working very closely with him. So I'm going to leave it to the prime mover behind all of this to explain the amendments that we have before you for consideration from all of those working. So, Mr. Vice Chairman. Hold on, I have to remember how to, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill, as amended, and I'll be going through the different amendments, it makes, Senate Bill 528 makes broad changes to the state's approach to reducing statewide greenhouse gas emissions and addressing climate impacts. Among other things, the bill increases the statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction requirement and requires the state to achieve net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. It establishes new and alters existing energy conservation requirements for buildings, increases and extends specified energy efficiency and conservation program requirements, establishes requirements for the purchase of zero-emission vehicles in the state fleet, and establishes new entities and new special funds to support related activities. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters and clarifies terminology, provides definitions for underserved community and overburdened community, requires MDE to coordinate with relevant stakeholders to access certain federal funding, and removes provisions relating to school construction from the bill. Amendment number 3 strikes provisions relating to monitoring and reporting on methane emissions, moves the termination provision on the bill's statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, delays the target date to 2031 for the 60% greenhouse gas reduction emission target, authorizes the final plan to include electric distribution and transmission infrastructure improvements, requires the Commission on Climate Change to establish specified working groups. Amendment number 4 strikes language that would have established a new core program and instead expands the scope of the existing Chesapeake Conservation Corps program to administer certain climate mitigation and clean energy projects. Amendment number 5 alters the application of provisions relating to the building energy performance standards for existing buildings, requires the state to adopt a requirement that new buildings are electric ready, and alters the membership of the Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force. Amendment number 6 alters certain percentages and purposes for certain targeted electricity reductions in certain years. Amendment number 7 establishes an electric school bus pilot program, establishes labor standards for projects undertaken by certain investor-owned utility companies, and establishes certain state policy goals with regard to the state's electric distribution system. Amendment number 8 requires primary procurement units of the state to ensure that a certain percentage of the electricity supply procured by the unit is derived from no or low carbon energy sources. Amendment number 9 alters the dates by which the state must meet certain zero-emission vehicle, passenger car, and light-duty vehicle purchasing requirements. Amendment number 10 requires the Maryland Green Building Council to examine and report on certain items relating to the procurement of concrete by the state. And Amendment number 11 requires the Public Service Commission to complete a general systems planning study. Move the amendments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There we go. Okay, thank you very much. What I'd like, Kristen, is for you to run through quickly the 80 pages of this very quickly, if that's possible. Oh, yeah, hold on, one quick thing. Delegate Holmes?
I second it.
Okay, go ahead. Well, let's just start at page, yeah, page 5.
So, in line 16.
There we go.
Oh, it's on now.
It's on.
So, okay, page 5 of the reprint, we're in lines 15 through 20. That's providing $500,000 for each of fiscal years 2024 through 2028 for the Maryland Healthy Soils Program. This section of the bill is subject to a termination provision. So in lines 22 through 24, that relates to the statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, and that's just being moved to another part of the bill that's not subject to termination. Lines 25 through 27 is the net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions target by 2045. And this provision is subject to termination, I think, in 2030. See, page 6 of the bill establishes the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund, which is a green fund for certain climate-related projects. There is mandatory funding in this bill for each of fiscal years 2024 through 2026. It's $5 million for each of those years. The bill came over with provisions impacting school construction. That starts on page 9. Those have been amended out of the bill.
And as an editorial comment, as an editorial comment, everything in here has been vetted with the Appropriations Committee.
So on page 10 of the bill, language is added to require the Department of the Environment in coordination with the Public Service Commission and the Maryland Energy Administration to coordinate with utility providers to apply for and access federal funds, and that's for the purpose of meeting policy goals of the state for electric distribution grid system. Page 11, we're in the area of the law relating to the Environmental Justice Commission. We're adding a definition of overburdened community, as well as one for underserved community. for the amendments?
Just go.
Do it all, okay.
At this rate, you'll be done.
Okay. So the department and the Commission on Environmental Justice are to coordinate on the adoption of a methodology for identifying communities disproportionately affected by climate impacts. Certain indicators relating to the underserved communities and overburdened communities that would be included in evaluating those methodologies. Okay, so on page 14 of the bill, that's the bill came over establishing a new core program. These provisions are being rolled into the existing Chesapeake Conservation Corps program, so when we get to them, I'll discuss them. So we are jumping to page So on the bottom of page 22, there was language that came over in the Senate bill that would have required certain monitoring and reporting on methane emissions, and that's being taken out of the bill. On page 24, that's the greenhouse gas reduction targets. That's where the 60 by 2031 is, and this has been moved to this part of the bill. And the conforming changes are made to the related plans that are due relating to those targets. So there's updates made to the final plan language. The bill establishes or requires the Commission on Climate Change to establish several working groups: the Just Transition Employment and Retraining Working Group, an Energy Industry Revitalization Working Group, an Energy Resilience and Efficiency Working Group, and a Solar Panel Recycling Reuse Working Group.
Remind me what page.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on page 28 now.
Okay. No, we're gonna take up other amendments after we adopt the amendments that were offered. So that your time will come.
And Delegate Clark, I am reading from the reprint copy, if that's what you're asking.
Oh, is that what you're asking?
So the next several
Go ahead and respond. You want to respond?
Can I just respond real quick?
Please, go ahead. We're coordinating with the Economic Matters Committee right now. So this is an example of examining a plane as you're flying.
We won't crash. Okay, so
Take your time.
so basically, I was explaining that there was the commission's required to establish new working groups. So that gets you to page 33 of the reprint. On the unnumbered page before page 33, there is an update to the existing Commission on Climate Change's reporting requirement. So there's a lot, yeah. So it would be
Halfway there, folks.
okay. On page 34, each state agency, when conducting long-term planning, developing policy, and drafting regulations, must take into consideration the likely climate impact of the agency's decisions relative to the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals and the likely impact of the agency's decision on disproportionately affected communities as identified under the earlier provisions of the bill. Down at the bottom of page 34, we have provisions relating to zero emission vehicle buses. the beginning fiscal year 2025 is when the requirements for so the new reprint would have been, mine's not, so there, did you receive the updated reprint
Yeah, there's enough.
right before voting?
Right before we convene.
That's the, yes, Delegate Auto 116 is the most recent reprint copy.
We'll wait a bit for everybody to get this recent reprint updated.
116. So this is page 34.
Yes,
So-
Delegate Foley? Oh, hold on. Yes, Delegate Foley?
Yes, is this the first reprint or the second reprint?
It's the reprint that was sent to us most recently, which I believe
Okay, okay,
was
thank you.
at 122.
Okay, thank you.
So when I'm referring to page numbers, it's the bill page numbers. I'll try to bring up the PDF too, because, you know, the bill was 70 pages, but I think we have over 90 pages.
Yeah, on the PDF, I'm on page 34 is where you were.
So I'm on page 34 of the bill, and the most recent copy was actually a Word document. The PDF went out earlier today. Just if you're looking at, they're
Yeah, you're right, it's a Word doc.
so. The timestamp, 116.
Bob, do you want to sit up here?
Uh-huh.
We'll find you a seat. Yeah, I have a email that I received from Trish 23 minutes ago at 1:22. It's a Word document, not a PDF. And so, Kristen, if you're,
Okay, so this part of the bill, page 30, bottom of page 34, going to page 35, relating to the zero emission school bus provisions.
yeah,
On page 36, there are definitions that apply to the building energy performance standards. A covered building has been updated from a commercial or multifamily residential building that has a gross floor area of 35,000 square feet or more. Manufacturing buildings and agricultural buildings are not covered under the definition. There are additional provisions in the bill relating to the building energy performance standards that are drafted to another place, so we'll talk about them when we get to those pages.
right.
Okay. So down at the bottom of page 36, there's a new program, grant program in HCD, Housing and Community Development article, and this would provide grants for the purpose of reducing direct greenhouse gas emissions from multifamily residential buildings, and would provide grants for energy conservation projects and projects to install renewable energy generating systems in covered buildings that house primarily low to moderate income households. And funding is provided for 3 years, fiscal years 2024 through 2026, at $5 million for each year. So the midway down, page 37, this is rolling in the provisions that came over in the bill that would have established a climate justice corps. It's rolling those provisions into the existing Chesapeake Conservation Corps program, and this is for administering clean energy and climate mitigation projects.
Hold on. Yes, sir.
If we have questions as we're going through, should we raise them as we go through, or should we hold off until the end?
Raise them as you go through.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, Kristen, I think you just mentioned that manufacturing buildings are exempted on, I believe, that it's on page 36, line 14. And is that a new addition to the Senate bill? It's a new amendment?
That's an amendment.
Okay. And is that a manufacturing building, is that basically any building that involves manufacturing?
The definition of manufacturing building is not in
Okay.
this, but it would be up to MDE, I guess, in their regulations to further clarify that. Manufacturing is defined elsewhere in the environment article. I'm not sure if it applies to this definition.
Okay. And then second one, this is what triggered me pushing my button, is on the rolling in the climate justice core or the climate, are all those provisions coming over? Like, I know that the Senate bill initially had some provisions as to like pay equity and, making sure that the core members were paid a decent wage. Is all that now into the?
Some of it came in.
Some of
The
it, okay.
the wage provision came in.
Okay. Okay, great. That's all I got so far. Thank you.
My mistake. Anyway, more questions. DFH.
Thank you. Kristen, do you know, as far as what Delegate Stewart was just talking about, as far as managing that core, who is responsible for managing that core in the latest version?
The Chesapeake Bay Trust.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question goes to Ann Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually on the Chesapeake Conservation Corps board, and one of the questions I have about this, adding these new obligations and duties, is there funding to go with it?
There is funding.
Okay, thank you.
Next, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to be back. So I just wanted to follow up on the pay equity on the core, and I think this is actually the same as it was as it came over from the Senate, but I had this question there also. And so I guess I'm actually jumping ahead in terms of pages, but since it came up, I wanted to ask this now. So it says a core member may receive a stipend, and then it says stipends for core members shall include monetary payments of at least $15 per hour. So does that mean they don't have to be paid a stipend, but if they are paid a stipend, it has to be at least $15? Am I understanding that right?
I think that's how I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Foley. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not used to this. Kristen, I see also in this part that you just went over, which I just lost on my screen, that schools are again exempted. So are schools not in this bill at all now?
Let me answer this. They're not. We, in our negotiations with the Senate, had believed that we were fundamentally at an agreement with that, and the reason for that is the cost that would inure to the budget. We didn't, we do want to go there. We just don't feel we can do that at this time. There are some provisions having to do with schools, though. Are there not? Or
Not
no, right. So that encapsulated. No, schools are not in the bill. That doesn't mean we're going to stop working on it in future years. Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
So I think that was it for the expansion of the Chesapeake Conservation Corps.
Okay.
So now we're on, I'm on bill page 46.
Okay. Oh, pardon me for 1 second. Would you like to tell the committee that? Clarification, guys.
There's one thing talking about in the amendment.
Oh,
Yes. Well, doesn't has or
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't touch the buttons, right? Right. Have to relearn all these rules. We will be adding as an amendment on the floor, the substance of House Bill 1290, which will provide funding for costs associated with getting a school to be net zero.
and that apparently that bill and the provisions of that were vetted by the appropriation. Yeah,
Wait.
Jen,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify,
that's
ACE,
not a bill that was in our committee.
but just to clarify, ACE, I didn't know what was meant by a school.
Schools.
are you reading off the amendments? When
No,
you see
I
that-
was responding to the Vice Chairman's statement.
He's looking at the fiscal note of that bill that was do you know the answer? Oh, go ahead, Gina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had, the chair and vice chair sent me with the senator in the fall on net zero schools. And what was determined is that the cost is net neutral, is neutral to build these schools. There were additional costs up to about $3 million for what I like to call a change management. And so it's helping the school teach the parents and the teachers and the administration about how to use the facility. And they said it took a lot of outreach and service. And so I think in this sense, if a school wants to build a net zero school, they could. The additional costs come into change management. So I'm saying that the second bill and appropriations would allow schools, if they decide to build a net zero school, to be able to apply for that extra money. That's like $3 million to work on that change management.
And that's going to be an amendment that we're going to be seeing on the floor of the House, and so it's not really a part of this package.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I found the specific provision in House Bill 1290 that is on point to what we're talking about. It provides a 5% increase in the state share for schools built as net zero buildings. So that provision we will be incorporating into Senate Bill 528 via floor amendment.
Okay, let's keep moving.
Okay, so on bill page 46, this one is establishing labor standards for contractors and subcontractors participating in certain projects undertaken by investor-owned electric companies or gas and electric companies. On page 48, that requires the state to adopt a requirement that new buildings are provided with sufficient electrical capacity and infrastructure to support the replacement of installed fossil fuel appliances and equipment without requiring destructive modifications to the building interior or exterior to complete the necessary electrical work for the installation.
What page was that again?
Page 48.
Oh, good question. Delegate Wells.
Thank you. Just to go back to page 46, so I just want to clarify, it's great to see the language added, but I just want to clarify what it applies to. And so just, can you clarify, is this for if it receives state funds, or is it only if it receives federal dollars?
Sit here.
Bob Smith from ECN.
Okay, thank you. Delegates, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Wells, this was a provision from House Bill 88 as passed by Economic Matters Committee, which generally requires PSC to help study and then provide incentives for upgrading the electric distribution grid in the state. It was independent of Senate 528. We, in particular, the ECM requires the PSC and MEA to work with the utilities to obtain federal funding under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Particularly the provisions cited deal with grid hardening and distribution grid upgrades. So there are some sticks in that bill which are brought over into here to require the utilities to obtain the federal funding. And for the projects that are funded with those federal dollars, the labor standards will apply. You'll see corresponding provisions also added to the Public Utilities article later in the reprint.
Okay, just to clarify though, are you saying that for the work that the investor-owned utility companies would be doing, that they would absolutely need federal dollars?
No, and the restriction on the labor standards only apply to the projects as they are funded by federal dollars to the extent of the federal dollars supplied.
Correct.
Not for others.
And just to clarify for everyone, the requirement for prevailing wage or Davis-Bacon, as it's considered, is a federal requirement. That's not something, that's what we'd have to be required to do if we got federal
Correct.
dollars. So this just affirms that we will follow the federal regulation.
For those federal dollars, yes, Delegate.
Okay, and that does not apply at all to state funds, just federal?
It does not apply to state funds or privately obtained funds from the ratepayer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next question goes to Delegate Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on, back on page 48, you were talking about the department shall adopt the requirement that new buildings are sufficient for electrical capacity and infrastructure, including circuits, New buildings, is that just talking about buildings that the state is building?
Right, yeah, it just.
So it's
all
any
new.
building, or is it the buildings over 35,000 square feet?
Well, this is the, let's see, turn my mic on, there we go. This is the provision that is commonly referred to as electric ready, meaning that there has to be sufficient capacity if 20, 15 years from now you wanted to switch out from gas or oil to electric, that there would be enough space to, and I guess electric wiring to accommodate that kind of a change in the future, if the person chose to do that.
Right, so Delegate Stein, when you were going through your amendments, you mentioned amendment number 5 is electric ready. Is this the amendment you were referring to?
Yes.
And so that's all buildings in the state, residential, commercial, everything?
All new.
So that would involve changing the building codes then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Another question from Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this would include residential buildings too? Or just over the certain size of the building?
This is all buildings, residential.
Oh, is it all residential?
2023, isn't that a pretty short time frame? I mean, I can think of a couple fairly large buildings that are under design and underway that'll probably break ground, right after the first year, and all the engineering and machine diagrams and blueprints are being drawn up.
Yeah. Well, let me.
At this time, so how do you, how are you going to allot for that? I mean,
Go ahead and push your button. Let's see if I can actually light you. No, I went to Jacob's by mistake. Just talk really loud.
Sure. Delegate.
Well, here we go. Okay, oh, that didn't work.
There we
ahead.
go. There we go. Delegate, typically when new building codes are adopted, they apply to new permits. So this would apply to buildings for which a permit had already been applied for, where design, construction was already in process.
So if the design and technical process is started in planning and zoning in different counties before the end of this year, they wouldn't be affected by this, is what you're telling me?
That would be my understanding,
Because
yes.
if you spent millions of dollars
Sure.
drawing up blueprints and stuff like that, and you had to go back, that would
Right.
pretty burden. Okay.
Delegate Jacobs has a
So,
question.
Mr. Chairman, so I can get this clear, this is not 35,000 square foot minimum. This is all buildings on or before January 2023. And it's prospective, or is it, and it's kind of in line with Delegate Clark's question. Is this projects that are in the pipeline are going to have to be upgraded?
It's prospective for new building.
Or is it
So-
prospective
Prospective.
after January 23?
That's
But if they're fall 22 with all their design, they basically got to scrap it if they can't get the permit in before 23, January 1st.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you have to have the permit before December 31st, 22.
It's
Delegate Holmes, do you have a-
January 1st, 23 is what it says here.
No, I mean, you would have, if you had the permit before then it would, this provision wouldn't apply.
But what I'm saying is if they're in the process, if they haven't applied before January, it says on or before January 1st, 23. So if they've done all the work and had all the engineering done and they're 3 months from January, they basically have to scrap that plan and start over on the electrical side? Is that?
They might.
In the interpretation of what this says?
If the permit's after January 1 of 23, they might have to make a change.
All right, thank you.
Next question goes to Ampry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm back on page 46. And what is this? Subsection B, part 4. I'm trying to get a better understanding of the aspirational goal of 25% with this plan for outreach, recruitment, and retention of state residents. But this isn't a requirement, it's just aspirational. So is this just a overall goal? Like, is there any accountability for these numbers, is 25% being achieved?
I mean, that's the goal. It's a goal.
He was on,
Right here. It's a goal. And it says that the language in the bill is an aspirational goal. This is on page 46 of the bill. At the bottom, new paragraph 4, B4.
So that's just a
yeah.
Aspirational goal because we don't have the line for it. So this is something that came out of
okay. And then the last question on this section is for minority individuals, that would be, what does that include? Just to make sure I'm clear.
same sort of language we have on the program.
Because, I mean, women and veteran are separated, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on the minority individuals. Just want to make sure I have an understanding of what that includes. So you said women and veterans, so that's already listed here, so I just want to get a better idea.
This is fairly common.
Got it. Okay.
Next question goes to Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me have a second question. The issue here with the codes and requirements of the January 1st, 2023, it just seems very problematic to me. I mean, and Marvin probably could be, Delegate Holmes would maybe put a little light on this, but if you have a developer that's developing a plot of land and all his houses are already spec'd out in different models and different architectural blueprints and things like that, but he just pulls the permits as he goes along, he'd have to stop and redraw his mechanical stuff for each model, which would do two things. That would aggravate the price up and put a sort of a longer time frame on him, which actually could cost him money too, and carrying costs.
I think we might have a clarification.
Yeah, it seems problematic.
Of course, it's going to go. Marvin, unpush your button. There we go.
One clarification about adoption of building codes, state building codes by local jurisdictions. Local jurisdictions typically have 12 months to adopt state code, so electric ready in reality wouldn't really kick in until permit applications in 2024. So that does provide
It gives them a little more breathing room.
Yeah.
A little more.
And again, the idea behind this is, I mean, to make a building electric ready is relatively low cost compared to having to retrofit a building. Let's say a building owner decides after the building has been built that they want to install electric appliances. That the cost there sometimes 4 to 5 times as much as making it electric ready up front. So that's the whole idea. Provide some choice for building owners, homeowners down the line.
I would agree with you there, but I guess my comeback on that would be, some of these larger developments are in planning stages for long periods of time, and that have to change up. Could it? It's either pay now, pay later. Some of that is going to be built into the price of the home to be able to stop in the middle of a development and do that.
Okay, well, Marvin has a comment. And then what I think I'd like to do is keep moving on, because I want you to ask questions and have them answered, but we're starting to veer in the direction of debate. Go ahead, Marvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In support of what's being said here, we all recall that the ICC codes are updated every 3 years or so. And so in the timeframes that are being discussed here, with respect to applications and with the timeframes that are currently being updated by the ICC codes, I think this is in alignment with normally takes place.
Okay, let's try to move on. Go ahead, Kristen.
On page 49, there's a requirement that the state adopt the International Green Construction Code, also by January 1, 2023. So on page 50, that's altering the percentages for targeting certain energy, electricity reductions.
Yeah, Bob, would you just very quickly explain to my committee what this, because this is more your bailiwick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, although the phrase doesn't actually appear in statute, this is what's known as the Empower Maryland program, where there is a surcharge on electric customers' bills to provide assistance for energy efficiency and conservation programs, and also to bring down below certain levels peak demand and load, electric load in the state. Currently, it's a 2% per year savings that is looked for in the program for the 2018 to 2020 and 2021 to 23, 21. They're 3-year cycles that PSC does. What the bill does, the amendments from the Senate would have said for 24 and 25, make that 2.25%, then 2.5%, then 2.75%. From 20 to 27 and following finally. There are anticipated additional bill impacts to that. The House position so far, these amendments anyway, is to cut down somewhat on the total cap to make it 2.5% per year in 2027 and following. Additional language at the bottom of page, after line 28 would shift also the core goals of the program from simply being electric load reduction and peak load reduction to include a more blended portfolio of reinforcing goals such as greenhouse gas emission reductions, energy savings, net customer benefits, and reaching underserved customers.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the estimate of what that assessment's going to be for the Empower program on my power bill?
It's actually the Senate language is very similar to Senate bill, I believe it's 996. The fiscal note for that, which is at a 2.75% change, would be between $6 and $8 per month. So if you take 2.75 and bring it down to 2.5, you'd have a corresponding reduction in the expected bill impact.
So during my summertime, that would be a 10% increase.
No. No, it would be, I mean, you said, basically, no, it would only be, in the first year, it would be, well, these are percentages, though, correct?
Actually, that would also depend upon your utility and your service territory. Neither the municipal utilities nor Chop Tank are included in the Empower Maryland charge. It would only be SMECO and the investor-owned utilities that are subject to the Empower Maryland charge. So I don't know what territory you're in, delegate, but yeah, if you're in Chop Tank, it doesn't affect your bill at all. Yeah. No, it's always been exempted from Empower Maryland since the original legislation.
All right, Dave, settle down. Okay. Okay, let's proceed. Thank you, Bob.
So at the bottom of page 50, this part of the bill is adding an electric school bus pilot program, which was the subject of a bill that came, I don't have the bill number written down, but it was,
It's Dave's bill.
it's drafted to be identical to the bill that was passed by the House. Seeing where we are. I think, so going through, there was other provisions dealing with high performance buildings. That's out of the bill. So, okay, I think jumping to page 55.
Page 55.
Page 55, and there's a requirement in the bill that each primary procurement unit must ensure that at least 75% of the electricity supply procured by the unit for use in the state is derived from certain energy sources, and language was added by our amendments that it would be derived from no or low carbon energy sources. Pages 55, 56, I guess through 58 is relating to the zero emission vehicle for passenger cars and light duty vehicles. The amendments do adjust some of the dates by which certain targets, purchasing targets must be met. Page 58, the bill came over establishing a net zero school grant fund. That is, that language is being taken out of the bill. Okay. The bill establishes the Climate Transition and Clean Energy Hub in the Maryland Energy Administration to serve as a clearinghouse for information on advanced technology and architectural solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. And an amendment was added in addition to the services, the assistance they would provide, that they would also provide technical assistance for increasing building performance and energy efficiency for other existing and new residential properties. There's a property tax exemption for community solar energy generating systems. This bill was the subject of a bill that came out of Ways and Means, so the provisions are intended to conform to that bill.
Page you on?
So that was page 60.
Oh, sure. Question?
So since property taxes are predominantly local government revenue, is there any provision to offset that loss to local government?
I don't know.
Ways and Means?
No.
No. And what page is that on, 60?
Yes, starting on page 60.
I think Delegate Stein, I'm going to push this little thing here and hopefully it'll turn your microphone. But it turned live off. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that while there is no reimbursement to locals for any personal property tax revenues lost, this is a very narrowly defined exemption. It's for community solar projects that are installed in certain locations and where at least 51% of the power that's generated serves low to moderate income households. So there are relatively few of those types of systems in place. And so while there will be some sort of hit, it's not, it won't be that much.
Or included in that? Included? Okay. And the rubble landfills are included?
Yes.
And your definition of community solar?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It's in the definition of brownfield.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Fraser-Delgado.
Thank you. And sorry to jump all over the map here, but for the fleet vehicles, is that in the same exact posture as the one that we passed out?
There's one additional provision relating to hybrid, where
Is that the provision where if no electric vehicles are available, they would have to buy hybrids?
yes.
Yeah.
So any passenger car purchased by the state vehicle that is not zero emission vehicle is a hybrid vehicle. That language was added.
So basically, if it's not available, if there's not an electric vehicle available, I just want to make sure we're not creating a space where they can just drive through it and just buy hybrids because they want to. First, they have to do EVs.
So I'm not, that restriction, the language is just does say any passenger car purchased for the state vehicle fleet that is not a zero emission vehicle is a hybrid vehicle. There's not a restriction on.
So that leaves it up to the state to decide whether they want to buy an EV or a hybrid? No?
Dana?
No. What it says is that, for example, if in a particular year, we're saying, for example, between years 23 through 25, any new passenger cars purchased by the state for the state vehicle fleet have to be zero emission vehicles.
Okay.
A procurement or an agency could purchase more than that minimum, but to the extent that they just bought the minimum that's specified in the bill, all other new cars have to be hybrids. They could not purchase standard internal combustion engine cars for the balance of any new cars that they purchase.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Let's move on. Next question goes to Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So quick question about the Climate Transition and Clean Energy Hub, if I'm not getting too far ahead.
Hold on a second.
Okay. If I'm not getting too far ahead,
No,
this
it's
is
fine.
page
Clean Energy
59.
Hub.
The Climate Transition and Clean Energy Hub within the administration, is that envisioned as an autonomous entity, not housed within an existing agency? Is that an omission? Is that purposeful or meant for the next administration
it's
to
MEA.
decide?
It's the administration is a definer, and it's the Maryland Energy Administration.
Oh, okay, okay. I didn't make that connection. Thank you.
And the next question goes to Delegate Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to go back to, I think, Delegate Weibel's question around the community solar and the tax credit. And I thought you were going to get to this point, but I guess, what do you think the economic impact, or how many projects do you think would be eligible for this? I thought you were moving towards that, but maybe. And if you don't know, that's fine.
No, Dana, do you want to respond?
Unfortunately, my answer will be I don't know, but it's not many.
Okay.
I mean, I would, if I had to guess, I'd say a handful currently exist, under 20 certainly at this point.
That was what I wanted to hear, because I feel like you were kind of insinuating that. I just wasn't sure if that's
Sure.
what you were. Thank you.
In a less evolved time, that might have been referred to as a red-headed Eskimo provision. Okay, please continue.
So I was just reading in the fiscal note, it says SDAT has identified 22 active community solar energy generating systems, of which 2 currently meet the exemption requirements of the bill. So the fiscal note touches on it a little bit, but I haven't, I'm just looking at it for the first time. Okay. So I think, so now we're going to page 62, and these are the energy performance standards that must be adopted by MDE for covered buildings. And the amendments in the reprint set a 20% reduction target in net direct greenhouse gases by 2030, and a net zero target by 2040.
We have a question. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't ask this back on the pages, but now since we're back talking about covered buildings, I was wondering if someone could explain to me why we went from 25,000 feet to 35,000 feet, and what, if we have any analysis about what effect that will have.
Yeah. Our friends in the Economic Matters Committee and in Southern Maryland felt that this would accommodate some of the major businesses in their part of the state that they did not feel comfortable including at this time, and that's the reason I and the Vice Chairman agreed.
Thank you.
A few more questions. Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kristen, back to what you just read off.
Sarah, if you could push your button. Thanks. Go ahead.
Kristen, what you just read off on page 62 with the BEPS provisions, 20% reduction by 2030, net zero by 2040. My concern is that's a pretty significant jump in a pretty long period of time. I worry a little bit that building owners might get off track in the interim, in that decade period, and have a hard time meeting the net zero goals by 2040. Does the department have any discretion under the bill to set interim targets if they want to, say by 2035, to help building owners sort of stay true to the course?
I'm not sure of targets, but this just, I wanted to point out that this provision sunsets in 2030. So it's going to have to be reauthorized by the legislature at that time anyway. So there could be a reevaluation from that process.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Weifel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Delegate Love's question. But the fact that all buildings have to be electric ready by next year, doesn't that really render the square footage a moot issue? Because they have nothing to do with square footage as far as all buildings.
Well, of course, the Vice Chairman can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that that was a concern that was brought up by our friends from ECM.
But your friend in ENT is raising it.
I don't know, am I wrong? He apparently was shaking his head when he meant to be nodding his head.
Just an observation. Thank you.
Do you want to say that?
Oh. just in looking at the bill, I think one of the focus of these standards would include energy use intensity targets by building type. And so it's not just about being electric ready, it would also be involved with its use of energy and energy efficiency.
No, I think the way to see it is that the whole concept of electric ready is to build the structure in such a way that if 15 or 20 years from now the owner at that time wanted to go electric, it wouldn't be involved like, you know, the knocking down of a wall or something major in that of that fashion. I think Dana might want to.
No, that's absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. And also just to clarify that the electric ready requirement applies only to new buildings. It doesn't apply to existing buildings. Large existing buildings are subject to the building energy standard, but they don't have to go electric ready in 2024. No, large buildings, 35,000 square feet or more, will have to, by 2040, achieve net zero direct emissions. Now, a lot of cases that would involve when their existing furnace ages out, that they could choose, you know, perhaps they choose to get to net zero by putting in an electric heat pump.
And again, the net zero goal will still have to be reaffirmed by the legislature. If we do nothing as a legislature, then that net zero goal will go away.
All right. Well, yes, electrification is not specifically required for existing buildings.
Okay, let's move on.
On pages 65, 66, this is basically restating the provisions we just went over. But since the net zero is subject to a sunset provision, this carries on the provisions, the 20% reduction, but not the net zero. So it's just a double drafting. This part of the law would take effect once the net zero part of the law terminates, if it terminates. Page 67, that establishes the Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force. Whoa. Yeah, you guys got it. So there's a variety of members identified serve on this task force, and the amendments do add additional representations from various industries.
Got a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That does add a municipal electric utility to the board, or to the commission.
One representative of a municipal electric
Because
utility.
I do represent one.
So
of those,
on page 68, at the bottom, second line from the bottom.
Yes, okay, thank you.
You want me to continue? I wasn't sure.
No, go ahead.
That's fine. I just didn't want to get. On page 60, the Building Codes Administration is required to develop recommendations for an all-electric building code. That was on page 70.
Page 7.
On page 72, the Public Service Commission must complete a general systems planning study.
when does it apply?
That study is due June 30th, 2023. There's a study requirement for MDE in conjunction with DGS and DNR to report on state properties that are suitable for use as organics recycling facilities. So that's page 72, so the next page is unnumbered. And new section 13 is requiring the Maryland Green Building Council to examine and report on certain items relating to the procurement of concrete. I think that covers.
I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. So, we have all of those amendments that the vice chairman has offered, and there are other amendments that are being offered as well. What I would like to do is vote on the amendments that we reviewed here, and then we will take up the amendments that are being offered by a number of people. So, the motion was favorable and it was seconded. Right. Okay, any discussion before we vote on that package of amendments? And I see a question from Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we have an idea for an amendment, but it's not on paper yet, what do you advise us to do?
Well, what's that? Yeah, I mean, we after we finish up here, Bob Smith is carrying the flash drive bill over to Economic Matters, and then they're going to vote. They're going to spend a similar amount of time voting. I understand that there is an amendment that's being offered, a friendly amendment that might be offered on the floor, but I'm not sure about that. And you know, it's going to have to go to the Senate, and as Delegate Lehrman said, this could be something that's ironed out.
So just briefly, this is somewhat technical, and it's related to the proximity of, and I forget if it's the definition of overburdened communities or where I saw it, but it's a reference to the proximity of a community to a hazardous waste landfill. Maryland doesn't have any hazardous waste landfills, and I learned that years ago when I first worked on the turf bill. But there could be communities near the boundaries of other states where there is a hazardous waste fill, like within a few miles across the state line in Pennsylvania or Virginia. And I was just concerned that maybe the bill should reflect that.
Well, given the timeline, I think that that's a bill that you will have to bug me about here, assuming arrogantly that I get reelected.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the motion, Delegate Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to thank you and the Vice Chair for your work on these amendments. I think on balance, these are really great and a big improvement. There are some areas where I wish we could have gone stronger, but I think on balance, these are much improved over the Senate, the version that came over, and I really appreciate your work on it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any further discussion or accolades before we proceed to? Okay, all those in favor of that? No, not lit up. Oh, it is now.
Sorry.
Delegate Foley.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just was going to ask if you could use the microphone because I'm having trouble here.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Sure, of course. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes seem to, okay, the ayes seem to have, the ayes have it. The bill is before us as amended, and I understand that there are amendments to be offered by a number of people. Let me, Jerry, do you have some amendments? Hold up, push your button so we can.
I think my amendments have been somewhat taken care of in the rewrite of this bill.
Okay.
So I'm satisfied with what's in there that my amendment would be.
Okay. Any other amendments? Delegate Weigel.
So I have two, but the amendment officers put them into one. So the first one actually would add the word net when it talks about the state's objective in reducing statewide net greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2030. And what that one word does is I think it takes into consideration all the work that's actually been done by this committee over the years as far as the tree plantings, the urban gardens, looking at the food deserts, farmers markets, growing local, and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I think without that one word, I think all that stuff just kind of goes for naught. And the second part of the amendment is totally unrelated to that, but it refers to the Tier 1 and Tier 2 energy sources as defined by the RPS, rather than referring to the new low-carbon renewable energy sources that are created, or that definition is created in this bill, because the Tier 1 and Tier 2, they're already known, and if for some reason there would be something added to the Tier 1 or Tier 2 list, this bill would automatically update, and you wouldn't require legislation to change that.
Well, the two of them are conferring on the second part of your amendment, but let me tell you about the first part of your amendment and why I would oppose that. That was actually brought up to me by the Secretary of MDE, and we had an extensive talk about that. And I'm not saying that the philosophy behind that is wrong, but my concern, and you'll appreciate this as a fellow accountant, I'm just concerned about the net carbon accounting. It's not like a balance sheet or an income statement where you can get it to inside of 0.25% or cash down to the penny. This is complicated stuff, and I have to honestly say that I don't feel comfortable with the way net carbon accounting is being done. I'm pretty comfortable with measuring the BTU or the carbon content of, cubic meters of natural gas or barrels of oil or gasoline, and however you measure heaps of coal. But I'm just not personally super comfortable with the way that sequestration is accounted for. And so when he proposed that to me, we considered it, and I decided not to. On the second issue...
Well, in response to that, I did get a calculator last night, what I would allow you to borrow.
There is that. Go ahead.
Delegate Weifel, from what I'm hearing, I actually don't have your amendment in front of me. Are you...
I gave them to Ben. Did you send those out? I have a copy here if you want to.
Oh, here we go. Oh, I think you have it.
Yeah, I was just looking at, so the definition for low-carbon renewable energy source is being taken out of the bill by the amendments that were discussed.
Okay, so then what does...
And so what it refers to now is derived from no or low-carbon energy sources. So the word, it came in as low-carbon renewable energy sources. Language was added to say no or low-carbon renewable struck energy sources.
Are they defined then in the bill?
No.
I mean,
so by referring to Tier 1 and Tier 2, it's already a known entity. That's the only reason I'm suggesting that.
Tier 1 and Tier 2 refer to wind, solar, offshore wind.
Yeah, it's
biomass. Tier 2 is large-scale hydro.
Yes.
So it also has waste to energy, refuse to energy, poultry litter. That's your Tier 1.
That's current law.
That's all current law is Tier 1.
Yes, that's in Tier 1.
The only thing left in Tier 2 is...
Tier 2 is renewables, including hydroelectric
hydro.
and pump storage.
Yeah.
Or other than pump storage,
Other than pump storage. We don't allow pump storage because it's double counting.
Right.
That makes sense. So, go ahead, Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just specifically about some of the items that are in Tier 1. For example, waste to energy, I wouldn't define that to be low emitting. So I guess for that, plus some other reasons, I would say vote no on this amendment.
Any further discussion on this amendment? Okay, yes? No. Okay. So we will, people are lining up for other reasons, so it's not as easy as Zoom, believe it or not. Okay, on the amendment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. The noes have it. Okay, next amendments. My ear is very good. I'm like my mom. She had perfect hearing up until the moment she died, which was not good for the other people who lived in assisted living near her. Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first, I would echo Delegate Ruth's accolades. I really appreciate all the work that went into this bill from, obviously, our committee's leadership in other committees and in other chambers, and obviously staff. I do have a couple amendments. They're drafted. I hope you have them. I'm going to actually pull out two pieces from the overall amendment because when I had not seen the amendments when I got my amendment drafted, and so some of them are now obsolete. But the first amendment is going to be an addition to page, move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
No, we don't do that. We don't do that here.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Actually, there's no you have to actually read the amendment. There's no consideration.
So on page 66, line 27, and maybe I just have not been able to break character from last night, but so y'all may have a hard time believing this, but this is actually, I think, a pro building owner amendment. So on line 27, it would say, this is sort of midway down the first page if you're looking at my amendment. It starts, the language starts with the word authorize the owner, and it reads, authorize the owner of a covered building to prepare and submit to the department for consideration and approval an alternative compliance plan that includes actions and timelines for the covered building to achieve progress towards emissions reduction targets, et cetera, et cetera. If the covered building, it goes on and on. Basically, if the covered building is having having trouble, meeting the emission reduction
Pardon me for
targets.
interrupting you, but I'm on page 37 of the, you said 27.
No, this is actually page 66. Line 27. Page 66,
line 27.
line 27.
Okay,
That's where I
excuse
think.
me.
Okay, maybe 63. Okay. Well, it says 63 on your amendment, but I think actually with the reprints, the numbers have been jumbled a little bit. I think
Numbers shouldn't change on the reprint.
Oh, okay, all right. So maybe 63. And basically the idea here is in many other jurisdictions that have passed similar emissions bills have essentially allowed an alternative compliance plan to be submitted and established rather than the owner just paying a fee. What we want here is for owners that are having trouble coming into compliance with the emissions targets, rather than them just sort of throwing up their hands and saying, I can't do it, I'll pay you. This would allow the department to work with those owners towards basically just kind of doing the best they can and avoiding a fee. So I'll move the amendment.
Okay, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Delegate, I appreciate what you're trying to achieve through your amendment, but I would argue that the language on page 66, line 16, which says that the regulation shall provide maximum flexibility to the owners of covered buildings to comply with building energy performance standards, would allow for the department to negotiate this type of alternative compliance plan with the building owner. I think we specifically allowed an alternative compliance fee because that's a fee, and so that's specifically why that's in there. But in terms of these other alternative compliance pathways, I would say the department already has that ability.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll withdraw that amendment and I'll try one more time, Mr. Chair. I have a second amendment. It's also drafted in front of you. It's actually much more simple and technical, and it's also much more on brand for me, which is on the second page of your amendment from Delegate Stewart. On basically at the end, it'll go at the end of page 68. The huge list of people that we're adding to the commission. Basically, I'd like to add quote unquote one representative who is a tenant of an apartment building or an advocate for the rights of tenants of apartment building. There are folks representing multifamily housing already on the commission. I think it would be helpful to have someone representing tenants to speak for their voice as these buildings are trying to come and comply with the requirements in the bill, especially as, you know, any plans could be adopted that could help assist, you know, tenants if prices went up or rents were increased. And so I think this is a relatively technical minor amendment, and I will move it.
Yeah. What? I think you got that one.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. We were conferring.
I think the chair just seconded it.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes seem to have it. The ayes have it. Don't press your luck. Delegate Clark.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I was looking at these and all the strikes that were in there, I got confused.
Okay.
One of these amendments, I thought the whole thing had been stricken, but it was another section. I have an amendment that basically, on page 26, around line 7. And
Can I interrupt you for one second? We're going to adopt that as a floor amendment. It makes more sense from the pathway of how this is going for that to be adopted as friendly floor amendments. That's the way we're going to do that. Pardon me for interrupting you.
And I'd be happy if you did mine that way too, but just so I could say I did it. Anyway, this amendment says in this paragraph where you're, it says shall include specific.
Could you give us the amendment number, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's amendment number 883-123/1. Amendment number 1.
Yes. Yep, go ahead.
Can I? It basically says that that we shall include specific estimates of greenhouse gas emissions reductions that could be achieved through the development and use of advanced small modular reactors.
Is there a second? Okay. Well, go ahead.
What is a small?
It's small package nuclear. It's
a new technology.
New technology that's coming out, that's starting to proliferate a little bit, and we're starting to see some of it happening around the country. And I just think that as we're moving forward with this bill that's going into 2020 and 30, that this is a possibility. I mean, let's face it, large nuclear reactors have achieved the savings in greenhouse gases on a large scale for the state of Maryland, and that we probably should be looking at this new technology as a possibility of being able to cut back on the greenhouse gas.
Well, let me, Delegate, first of all, as you know, I've been on the record as being an environmentalist who likes nuclear energy. But I don't think it really belongs in this kind of a bill. I'm not going to vote for the amendment. I will tell you, though, there are several places, 2 places in this bill where we have specifically, I'll read it, can't remember what page it's on, but we actually direct the, who do we direct? We're actually directing a study to study the lifespan and viability of energy facilities in the state that do not emit greenhouse gas emissions, including solar, nuclear, wind, geothermal, hydroelectric, and biofuels. And so, you know, we really do need to know how long Calvert Cliffs is going to last. And the reason we have to know how long it's going to last is because if it were to be switched off, the solar field to replace it would be 4 times the size of the city of Rockville. And so it's an important facility. We are at least, but as far as this completely new technology is concerned, I've read a lot about it, but I think the place to direct our department, our MEA or whoever it would be, really doesn't belong in this bill. I think it belongs as a freestanding separate bill. And so for myself, I love you, I love the technology, but I don't think that belongs in this bill.
Well, I appreciate the other mentions in this bill of nuclear. I truly do, but I just thought I'd take a shot.
Okay. Any
So,
more
thank you.
discussion on the matter? All those in favor signify by saying aye. No, opposed, no. No. The noes, the chairman feels the noes had it. So, any further amendments or discussion on the bill before we proceed to a roll call vote? Yes, Dave. No? Okay. Okay. Motion is favorable. It's been seconded. Roll call. Coming in under 3 o'clock. Marvin, you have your... No. Just speak loudly.
Vice Chair Stein.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Learman. Yes. Fraser Hidalgo. Yes. Otto.
This is the bill as amended.
Jacobs. No. Weibel. Ampray.
Yes.
Siliberti. Wells.
Yeah, push your button so we can hear you. There we go.
All right, thank you. No, so I'm voting yes, slightly reluctantly voting yes, but largely, I do thank the committee and also our vice chair and chair for this monumental undertaking. I just want to share, though, that I think as we heard testimony on this bill, and I've heard it now for about 4 years in different iterations, oftentimes we talk so much about how the clean energy, the climate resiliency agenda is going to create thousands of jobs, and that these are supposed to be good paying jobs, quality jobs. And leaning into my designation as a labor standards person of this committee, as we poked fun at last night, I just want to say that it is my hope that moving forward with the Just Transition Task Force report, with the Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force, my colleagues and advocates, that all of you fight as hard for this robust vision that we are going to pass in the Climate Solutions Act for labor standards. I've stood with a lot of advocates and I've said, my challenge with this is that we often put that on the back burner. And I know a lot of my colleagues in the labor movement, a lot of workers, a lot of my constituents, they really want to see us move something that is meaningful, not only to making their communities cleaner and more beautiful, but also to providing jobs that will sustain them. And so I'm voting yes, but I'm also making it known that I want us to be even bolder when we talk about the economic impacts that this bill can have.
Delegate Love. Ruth.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do vote yes. I first of all wanted to express support for the comments of my colleague, Delegate Wells. I think that it's very important that we make sure that these jobs are good jobs, labor supporting, family supporting jobs. And I also hope that we can move forward on electrification. I'm disappointed we couldn't do more, but I think that being short of actually starting this process of electrifying, we've gone right up to the edge of that, and I appreciate that as well. So I am going to vote yes. Thank you.
Prettyman. Foley.
I think she was.
Yes, I'll be voting yes as well, and I would also like to explain my vote. I associate myself with the comments from Delegate Wells and Delegate Ruth, and just want to point out that in addition to everything that they said so eloquently that I can't expound on, I just want to say that I think going forward it's really important that we partner with the unions and with other groups of workers so that they too understand that climate change is very important for the future. And the only way we can do that is to do what Delegate Wells outlined in terms of what we do in the future. But I do appreciate the work on this bill, and I'm really happy to be a part of the process to get it passed. Thank you.
Stewart.
Yes.
Lehman.
Oh.
Thank you to both you and your trusty sidekick, Delegate Stein, for all the work, and Kristen as well. I'd just like to say I'm proud to vote favorable. I do hope that we will continue to explore and reconsider the role of green schools and net zero schools. I think that we are missing an opportunity if we do not in the next very near future, next year or two. There are thousands of school buildings across this state, and we'll continue to build those, of course. So we can't leave those out. But thank you very much, and I vote yes.
I see a field trip in our future.
Teresa.
Yes, and if I can explain my vote, I just echo the comments of a number of my colleagues, and thank you for all your work on this, and I'm proud to be part of a yes vote on this, so my vote is yes. But I did want to echo the comments of Delegate Ruth in terms of electrification, and particularly Delegate Wells and Foley in terms of jobs and working with unions. I think that's so important, a part of how we move forward on this issue, and I think I'd be remiss with in not mentioning that, and I appreciate your words on that, Delegate Wells.
Okay.
Kara, excuse. Boyce.
Yes, and to explain my vote, I echo my colleague from Baltimore City, and to even say the first year we were here, and this came up I literally kicked someone out of my office because of labor standards and the idea that somehow we would pull people from good paying jobs and then throw them in something that would be 15 hours, dollars an hour or less. And that was infuriating to me. So I'm certainly hopeful that we get to this point. But my other point I want to make, and I know we pushed to get the environmental justice language in the bill, my hope is that through this language, we will start seeing actually people in these communities and affected here in Annapolis leading this movement, and not just the organizations leading the movement. And that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
I gotta say, I sold my soul on this earlier. I promised someone that if we got nuclear in this, I'd vote for the bill. And the one thing that I can only own in myself is my word. So I'm going to vote yes to move it from committee. I can't guarantee you that I will vote yes for it on the floor. But
baby steps.
I appreciate the nuclear, because in my mind, if you're going to ever get to total electrification, you're going to need solar. I mean, you're going to need solar, but you're also going to need a tremendous amount of nuclear power to be able to. And I really believe that in my heart. And so I appreciate you putting that in this bill.
Jalisi, excused. Anderton.
There we go.
So I really wanted to vote for this. I guess it's anticlimactic now. But there are a lot of good things in this that I agree with. And there's a few things in here that I am not so sure about. And so, sometimes the few outweighs the many. And this is one of those times, everybody's talking about electrification and getting rid of natural gas and propane and things like that. And I just don't agree with that at this point. I don't think our electric grid is there. Like I said, it's a little different on the shore, the way that our electric's generated and where it travels from. And any additional burden to that, I think, could pay some negative dividends. Still have some questions about, ag buildings and things like that. I think even though they may be protected in this, I don't think it's for long. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to vote no.
Okay.
Gilchrist.
Yes.
Healy?
Yes, and I would like to explain my vote also. I really and truly appreciate Delegate Wells' comments. It is the one thing that I feel very strongly that we really need to do is to make sure that, I mean, I grew up, as everybody knows, I grew up in coal country, and coal mining was, even though it was dangerous and it was hard, after the unions were formed, families could live on a miner's salary. And that's still true in West Virginia. And we don't have coal mines in Maryland anymore. But I don't want to see those good paying jobs disappear. Bethlehem Steel disappeared and was not replaced with comparable family supporting jobs with full benefits. It was the pride of the whole United States that we have a middle class. We had a middle class that was able to thrive on just good hard work. And I commit, if I'm back here, to working with you to do whatever we can to make that happen. I vote yes on this bill.
Chairman Barvet.
Chairman votes yes. And the margin is, Trish?
18-5, two out.
Okay. It's great to see you all live. It's great to see all of you out there, although you're a little fuzzier than you were on Zoom. And any announcements for the committee?
Housing on real property.
We're adjourned.
5 minutes left. 5 minutes left. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Jerry. We were in there. I didn't know if I'd get your vote for it, but I